It has been said that average people want you to stay average. Welcome to the Breaking Average podcast, the podcast designed to challenge you to break the mold that average has on the world. Each episode offers insights directly from those who choose to break average every day. Now, for the latest insights, here are your hosts, Paul Gustafson and Mike Harbour.
Hey, welcome to the Breaking Average podcast. I'm Mike Harbour. No, I just want to be Mike Harbour. I'm Rick Morris, and I'm filling in for our good friend Mike, who's on assignment, and want to welcome in my dear friend Paul Gustafson. Paul, how you doing?
Rick, thanks so much, man. That was great. Yep. We should all do that where we pretend to be somebody else in our podcast, and that would be fun. So we could have some a new sense of humor to it, right?
I'm not pretending. I aspire to be Mike Harbour. For all those that watch this and think that he picks on me too much, he's only training me to be as cool as he is, and I know that.
I aspire to be like Mike too, right? I mean, I hear the Gatorade commercial playing right now. I want to be like Mike.
A lot of people thought that was about Michael Jordan, but we knew that to be about Mike Harbour. So we're going to be, and this is what happens when Mike is on assignment. We're just going to pick on him for the first 5 minutes where he can't defend himself. But I will pay for that dearly in another podcast, I am sure. But today we're going to dive into the 7 critical factors of team strong leadership from the book Breaking Average, and we're going to continue trust. And man, I'm ready for this one, Paul. I'm ready.
Oh yeah, it's good because we have had just a great dialogue. We talked about credibility. We talked about dependability. Today, we're going to continue this discussion on the trust factor. Trust creates confidence. Confidence is what invariably elevates teams, organizations, those around us. It elevates us to a higher level. It helps us break average. Trust is so critical. And so I'm excited to be able to continue this dialogue today.
Yeah, we really broke trust down, or you broke trust down in your book, Breaking Average, but it was credible, right? You got to be credible, you got to be dependable. And now that those two there, we get to wrap this up with serve. Like, how can we really help others? And a quote that came to mind there, one of my favorite quotes from Muhammad Ali, which says, "Service to others is the rent you pay for your room here on earth." And I love that quote. We get to earn our opportunity, regardless of what you go out and you think you have. It comes back to the significance, quote that John Maxwell talks about. But serving others is just really a great way to show up. And Paul, I know that you had a chance to sit down with David Horsager, who's perhaps the world's #1 expert on trust. And I wanted to just go ahead and air part 2 of that interview, if that's okay with you. If you missed part 1, go back and watch it. It was a fantastic part. But even if you didn't, you'll still benefit here. So you and David took a little bit of a deep dive, or a deeper dive into how we can build trust.
Yeah, it was so much fun sitting down with him. He's from Minnesota, grew up on a farm, and he kind of unpacked that story in part 1. Just kind of how he became a leader. And we all have really powerful stories of leadership. And here's the thing, guys, before we get into this interview, every powerful story of leadership has service tied to it, right? You can't become a leader without service. In fact, John taught me that, John Maxwell. He shared the one book that made a difference for him was Servant Leadership by, forget his name, Oswald Sanders, not Chambers. Everybody thinks it's Oswald Chambers, but Oswald Sanders. And that book was revolutionary. I went back and read that too. And David Horsager, certainly influenced by John Maxwell himself, he and I had a chance to sit down, and he unpacked this a little bit further. He shares something I think is really, really powerful on trust. And you guys just listen in, lean in, and watch part 2. Does trust have to be earned, or can it be given?
So this is fascinating. So in last year's study, we asked people what they did. First of all, the quick answer, because I don't like to go around it like a politician, is yep. It can be given. or it can be earned.
Right.
But let me tell you, what we want to really land on is what you can do, what I can do, and I can earn it. If I'm trying to get trust, I don't. It doesn't do me any good to say you should give it. I to those people can earn it. But I want to give you just a quick data point and context for this. So last year on the U.S. side of the study, it was about half and half when we asked, are you more apt to just give trust until people break it? Or are you more apt to, they need to build it before you will trust? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
In other words, they lead with trust or they lead with skepticism.
Right.
Okay. So the bottom line is, it doesn't mean either is wrong or right. It's just what is. It was about 50% each way.
Really?
But just for context, those over on this side that were willing to give it right away, they probably had a really safe upbringing. They had a lot of good. So this side that you need to earn it from, that they lead with skepticism, often something happened to them before 20 years old. It wasn't their fault.
Mm.
They were raped. Something terrible happened, and it wasn't their fault. So what's the message I would say for you and me and anybody is, for us, either way, we need to earn it. Some will give it freely and quicker. Some you need to earn it longer. But as a leader that's breaking average, what do we need to do? We just need to keep earning it consistently. And some will give us more faster, and some will take longer. But our action stays the same, earning it every day.
Yeah, we've got to earn it every day. You know, one of the things we talk about is you got to give trust to earn trust. And at least that's some of the examples that we've seen as we've studied stuff. And you guys have done much more deeper research on this, but is that something that you're able to validate in your research?
Well, so I wrote one chapter on that. That's a really interesting and true statement that you have, but it's complex. And so almost always I can extend more trust to my team and I'll get more out of them, right? Mm-hmm. But it is also true that I can extend too much and have a big and so you have to weigh out the risks of that. So yes. Where kids are concerned, where healthcare is concerned, like I think of I'm a young kid. One of the first times I drove the tractor, I ran right into our brand new Chevrolet Caprice, right in front of my mom and dad. Couldn't blame it on my brother, right? So you could say, well, they extended trust too early. You know, maybe they did, maybe they didn't. I didn't have many more accidents because, that taught me something too. And, so but there's a truth to getting the most out of people. You have got to create an environment you can extend trust to them. Right. So one way I would think about that just specific problem is the more experience someone has, the more time you have, the more trust they have, the less you micromanage, the less you have to give feedback, right? Mm-hmm. Less. So it's an inverse relationship. The more they have, the less you have to give. But if they're brand new, actually, some people are lazy leaders and they just want to extend trust because they don't have to do the work of leadership, of giving feedback, of holding accountable. And actually in last year's study, I believe it was last year's Outlook, we found that actually, I was surprised by this because people want appreciation a lot, but they actually really wanted critical feedback. They want critical feedback. And so they want to know where they're at. They want to know what they're doing right and wrong. And so, it is a little change. But so the less experience someone has, you can really put off a new employee or new intern by not giving them critical feedback, by not being more hands-on. But of course, just like kids, you want to continually trust more, but equip them at the same time. And that's a very delicate balance sometimes, based on maturity.
Yeah, I think it's so important to evaluate the performance of your team, your contributors, give them props where they need it, where they deserved it, kudos where they deserved it. If there's areas of improvement, right, continuous improvement, it's important. They need that feedback. If we don't provide feedback to them, then they're not going to grow. We're not going to grow as a team. The trust is actually going to be severed over time because, I think there's accountability is a good word that you shared a moment ago.
We have an accountability framework, but I'll say one quick idea here. And I love Ken Blanchard and the 1 Minute Manager, and I know him, but his deal is, give the feedback quickly, positive and negative. And I would say, notice the authentic. So notice and be authentic. So notice the good and say it right away. Notice the challenge and say it right away. Notice the issue, say it, don't hold things in. I had a mentor one time say, if your annual review is longer than an hour, you're not doing your job every day. I think that the high trust way is to notice and give ongoing feedback with love, but that's great. And some people, not this, let's give hamburger feedback and you do an appreciation on the first bun. The bun is appreciation, both sides, and you sandwich it, the sandwich feedback in the middle, you give the bad thing. It's like, it's so inauthentic and just hurts trust. Just notice authentically on the fly, but notice both.
Notice both, yeah. And we've been studying creativity work, and really the creatives, the ones that really take it to the next level, they seek that feedback. Maybe they don't seek it initially because nobody wants to hear the negative stuff, but when they do seek it and they ask that question, hey, what did you like? Number one. Two, what did you wish was different? And rather than say, what did you not like? What did you wish was different? That gives opening a trigger point for that other person to provide feedback without necessarily, hurting the ego.
I
of
like
that person.
that.
Yeah.
Where's your opportunity or whatever? I like that. I think that's a simple, clear, valuable way. I love it.
Yeah. So you've got a new book coming out that I am super pumped about, and we get to highlight it here on this show, on our podcast, as well as on the Empowered Living show. So tell us a little bit about it, right? So the Trust Edge was written a few years back in 2012, I think it was. Tell us about the new book.
Yeah, it was even earlier than that. It took a while to get picked up by a big publisher because I learned how people would say no for a long time on that Trust Edge, but then it did well self-published and became actually an authentic Wall Street Journal bestseller, and kind of miracles happened. But the new book is called Trusted Leader, and we're really excited about it. The publisher's excited about it. First half is a simple, clear, inspiring parable that really shifts thinking about trust. I thought when I did the grad work, I thought I knew it all about trust. And I thought, well, like I said, just integrity, just honesty. So you follow this leader who has this, almost loses everything, including his company, and actually does have this miracle turnaround because of a shift of thinking around trust. So that's a really cool, fun opening. And then the second half is this application, actionable takeaways around this 8-pillar framework of how things a leader can do right away to build that pillar and build trust. So under each pillar, the 90-day quick plan, which is kind of that how strategy where I lost the 50 pounds, or the SPA method of how do I create an encouraging environment, or we share the Trust Shield, one of our most valued and powerful activities that we do out of the Institute. So it's just some actionable takeaways that leaders can apply on themselves, and they can lead their teams through if they'd like to increase performance with trust.
Okay, I'm really curious. I can't wait to read it. So you've got these eight pillars, and we talk about being credible as one of the 3 elements on the trust element for breaking average. So on the be credible part, I think it ties to character. So give us can you share with us maybe a practical application that folks can put into play right away to increase that character, that credibility that they have with the team?
And by the way, I would say credibility absolutely is an outcome of high character. It's an outcome of trust. The work is the character that builds credibility, which is equal to trust under that pillar. One simple idea would be know not just your values. Lots of people talk about their values, whether their values in life, faith, family, friendships, or their values for the company, by which they often, might use one word to describe. Our values of the company are this. I would push leaders to define their decision-making values, 5 or less. In fact, we've had universities where they put these decision-making values on their door to change the culture of the university. So we've had companies do it. I do it. So what are the values that, as a leader, you're going to make every decision by this, and you can't have more than 5. So when I walk into your office, I can see those. Okay, I know they're going to go by this every time, no matter what. And so what happens is your decision-making gets sped up, and your credibility and consistency increases because you're making decisions by your values and it's not something else. Now, if you're watching my video, I'll give you a really great example. One of our values is excellence, okay? And we had some, the first publisher, by the way, when I was trying to get this published in 2008 or whatever, the first book, and couldn't get a publisher. Finally, I got a dinky little publisher, and I had a New York publisher interested a little bit. And the New York publisher at that time said, well, we'll put it on soft cover. If I pull any leadership book out behind me, I don't want to, actually, I better not, because I'll show something negative, but almost all of them have that yellowish, cheapish paper, right? And we said, we've got this value of engagement and fun and also of application. And so you see at the back of each, we had some specific values. One of them was excellence, basically. So they said, well, we'll do it soft cover. We'll do it in this kind of binding. I said, the little publisher said, no, we'll do it hardcover. We'll even put a ribbon in it. We'll put it on this nice opaque paper like you wanted, David. We'll use your design that you paid your designers to do. We'll use the highest level of binding of the 12 levels of binding. And yes, we'll make it hardcover so it feels trusted like you wanted. And what I said is I could go New York or I could go this little publisher. And we said, absolutely, we're going little publisher. Because they are on our decision-making process, they fit what we want everything to be excellent, right? Mm-hmm. Now, we had the miracle buyout of the biggest publisher in the world, and but you can't count on that. On the other hand, I don't think Simon & Schuster and Free Press at the time would have ever bought the book if we wouldn't have stayed on brand with who we were. But that was one example of making decisions by your values and how it speeds things up and makes things more consistent. Even when you think, oh, I could be with this New Yorker, oh, I could do this, but no, stay on your decisions. And we saw a CEO, not a great CEO she was, but she wasn't overall trusted, So she came up with her decision-making values, and 9 years later, they're like, we don't just like her, we now trust her because we know how she's going to make every decision. And I'm not saying those decisions are right or wrong. It's just like we know, okay, if you're going to make decisions on this, that's how you're going to be every time,
That's a powerful story. And I was writing, I'm capturing notes. I've already filled up my piece of paper here just in our conversation. And decision-making values, I love that concept. And you talked about excellence. And when you pick those, right? And maybe they're one words, maybe they're a little bit longer than that. I
like phrases, by the way, if you can, because phrases are stickier. Integrity is like, what's that mean? If you can say, like for us being the same on stage and off, we know what that means. It's just stickier, but it is okay to have one word.
Yeah, I like that. I like that better because then you get
do unto others as you would have them do unto you, or we have that as one. Go ahead. Sorry,
that's great. That's good because once you have those, then you're not going to want to compromise on those. And the story that you just shared was, wait a minute, we're not going to compromise on the excellence that we want to do, right? Because otherwise we're like, well, okay, we'll compromise on that, I guess, at the end of the day, it's just getting it out, and delivering.
And New York at the time was a bigger decision than it might sound like today. Now we've had all these opportunities, but 10 years ago, I mean, that was a big decision that was quick only because of values.
Right. And I discovered your book, by the way, I thought it was 2012 when it came out, but I saw it in the store. I bought it in the store. I'm like, ooh, that looks like a good book. It caught my attention because you had committed to excellence. You do judge a book by its cover. Let's be honest about it, right?
And if people open our books, if they open them, the design is just now more and more people are doing a little more design. But back then, Daily Edge too, that was I think 10 weeks on the Hudson list, and that's just a tip book. But you touch that, you feel it. It just like it's you can feel the trust that's put into it.
Yeah, it's good. It's really good. And it's a really good way for me to kind of evaluate the book before I bought it because of the way that you had laid it out. And then of course, reading it and then masterminding it with other people. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Obviously we're the Breaking Average podcast and we're just having a lot of fun talking about how to break average. But what does that mean to David Horsager? What does breaking average mean to you?
I don't have a crazy definition other than it's breaking the norm of what everybody's doing. That's how I understand it. And, you're the one who said what it was. Just my first response is it's not doing what everybody else is doing. It's breaking the average. And for me, that's always trying to break the average for better, for good, for more world change, for more impact in spite of myself.
Yeah. And trust is one of those great levers that will increase that breaking average capacity, right?
I absolutely believe that.
Yeah. So this new book that's coming out, The Trusted Leader, tell everybody the date that they can expect to find it.
Trusted Leader, you can pre-buy it now since it's, with publisher. You can get it on, anywhere, Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, or, from us, whatever. But its launch date is March 30th. So March 30th, 2021. But it's, you can go ahead if you do, if you want to pre-order right now and you send us a receipt, then we get a whole gift of something like $1,000 worth of gifts and tools and masterclass if you'd like those. And of course, it has a reading guide if you want to do it with others. But we put all that in your www.trustedleaderbook.com/breaking average, and you can get that because of y'all know Paul.
I love it. I am so excited about this. This is so good. You really helped start me on this journey of reading a book a month way back when. So it's really, I blame you, and that's in a good way. It's a good thing.
I love it. And I love what you've done with your book clubs and book studies. It's such a great thing. But people don't know this, but the average number of hours a person watches, kind of just floofy TV is like 1,287 hours a year. And the average number of books an American reads in their lifetime after their formal education is 1 in their lifetime after their formal education, which means what? Most people are reading 0 because you're reading, 20.
Yeah. So guys, just read a book a month. You're breaking average if you just do that.
Absolutely.
Start with David Horsager's, both his books. Buy 2 copies of each, one for yourself, one to give away. And you want them both, The Trust Edge and The Trusted Leader. Fantastic book. So David, what is the greatest word of advice you've ever received that you can kind of share with the rest of us?
Oh, there's so much. I'll give you 2 right off. Okay. So I know you asked for 1. Try to over deliver here. On this trust work, Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, trust the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your understanding, in all your ways, acknowledge him, and he'll make your paths straight. I've learned a lot about trusting God and how apart from him, I can do nothing of kingdom value. I'm grateful for that. And there's a huge part of that in my life and learning about trust for sure. A piece of advice from my work is it's the little things done consistently that make the biggest difference, not the big things. And that's little things, not this big win, not this big sale, not the big wedding day. A friend of mine says if people would spend as much on their marriage as the wedding day, they'd have a better marriage. If they'd spend as much on parenting as they did on that one weekend Lamaze class, they'd actually be better parents. So, doing the little things consistently that make us, that create us as leaders, as, friends, as fathers, in my case, as I hope, in spite of ourselves, world changers for good. It's the little things done consistently that are going to make the biggest difference. So I found that in my body. If I do a few little things differently, I have a better body. If I do put a little different things in my head, I'm speak better things to the audience or my clients or coaches. If I do little things in my marriage, it wasn't that big wedding day, that big ring, or not big one in my case. I had no money at the time, but that ring, it's little things done consistently that would make me a good husband. It's little things done consistently that make you as a leader. And in my case, of course, it is seeking to build these 8 pillars every day, because I believe everything of value is built on trust. So it is those little things in many ways, but it's little things done consistently. And that, people really want a quick, big fix, and that comes against it.
Yeah, I love that idea, the little things, because that's like compounded interest, right? So when you work on those little things, and it may seem small at the time, but when we look back, hindsight being 2020, we see the impact of those little things over time. And I love this idea of building, right? So those pillars, we all have an opportunity. We just don't build it once and then we're like, okay, cool, we're done. Let's just go on. You got to keep at it, right? You got to keep going with the work.
That's bummer. That's the bummer. To get back to the farm, 2 things. I said, you got to do the work, which is true. But you also notice on the farm, healthy things grow and sick things die. Healthy cows grow, sick ones die. Healthy corn grows, sick corn die. But that's the same. It's the same. Healthy churches grow, sick ones become divided. Healthy marriages grow, sick ones become divorced. Healthy organizations grow and sick ones die. And the only way to have healthy things is to consistently put the right thing in, the right water, the right fertilizer, the right cultivating. And that's the challenge of our lives, right? To consistently put the little things in. And that's the work of health and growth, but that's what we're going for.
Yeah, fantastic. So one more time, your website, so everybody can go there. And obviously you created a special link for us, but just tell everybody the website again.
The big site, trustedge.com, the site specifically for you and where the book is today, and you can get some free great bonuses, and I'm sure you can find Trust Edge from there, is trustedleaderbook.com/breaking average.
Yeah, we'll put that in the show notes. Excited. So, Dave, I really have enjoyed this time. Any final thoughts before we let you go?
I trust you.
Hey, I trust you too. And really, it's been just an honor just to get to know you. And thank you for being a part of our community here. And, blessings to you and your family. And best wishes with this book. I think it is what the world needs right now. And I appreciate you doing this, taking time to do this, you and your team.
Thank you. Trust matters more than ever, I think. But yeah, thanks for joining me on the journey and sharing it with your great people.
Wow, what a fantastic interview. We hope you enjoyed it. There's tons of gold in that. Again, I love, again, as we start talking about evaluating the levels, right? When he starts talking about that in the new book, how to measure trust. And again, I think it comes to that commitment, consistency equals the dependability, but then the service really is what you need to build the trust. What do you think, Paul?
Yeah, so the service is so critical, and you talked about, in part one, he shared a little bit about it, and then he kind of came back to it in part two in terms of just the examples in his life. They all reflect service. I asked him in part two, the opening question there. If you go back and watch it again, it was really powerful. I asked him a question: Does trust have to be earned, or can it be given? And the way he unpacked that, I thought was really, really powerful. And so, I can't wait to dive deeper into his book. At this point, I know that book's available. You want to grab it, but we also got a resource that he created just for the Breaking Average group. So we invite you to just go grab this. Go to trustedleaderbook.com/Breaking Average. He's our in-kind sponsor today. We're just honored to be able to have him, with this interview, and we wanted to just recognize him as our in-kind sponsor. And please go buy his book. Go buy 2 of his books. All right, one for yourself, one to give. All right, and make an impact. Maybe lead a book study on this, because we can all benefit from greater trust. And we're going to unpack that some more, and just the service element to it. But again, connect with him at breakingaverage.com. Just go to our site. We'll have that same link, or go to trustedleaderbook.com/Breaking Average. So yeah.
I love that you said buy 2 books and share. One of the ways you served me, Paul, you invited me into a mastermind group where we get to unpack these different books. And quite frankly, I probably would have not read some of these books or had some of these discussions had you not, asked me to do that. But it's a way you serve. But what a great way to enlighten people and to not only build trust with them is to buy a copy of a book like this and then walk through it and discuss it, right? As John Maxwell says, experience isn't the greatest teacher, evaluated experiences.
Yeah.
And I love that group where we have the opportunity to kind of share personal stories and share what's happening and how that book fed us and the different perspectives, right? Where somebody goes, I didn't see that at all when I read that. I saw this,
Yeah.
It's really, really great way for us to learn. So let's dive a little bit deeper into this word serve. Right? What does serve mean, and why is this so important, Paul?
Well, and the example you just gave is an example of service too, right? So we can go, we serve in a lot of different ways, right? We can serve through, you think of the love languages. One of the love languages is acts of service. Well, the truth of it is that we all benefit from acts of service. We all are appreciative of that. We're thankful for our men and women who are in uniform, who have served us, those on the front line who have served COVID. There's so many great examples. We're in a position ourselves to serve, and it's so important. So some thoughts here in our book, Breaking Average, we kind of unpack this a little bit more. It's one of the best ways to earn trust is by showing others you care and that you are in the fight alongside them. When you serve with somebody, you build a relationship. That's what's great. Serving is one thing, yes, but serve with somebody else. That's even a greater thing, because when you serve with somebody else, it's like that's a bond that can't be broken. You and I have served together, Rick, through the John Maxwell team, doing leadership awards and doing some other things. We have a bond that can't be broken. And I just want to encourage you, it is so powerful to be able to do that. When you serve others, you're demonstrating your belief in a cause and that you're all in with them and you're for them. And if you're a leader, you want to give some credit to what they're doing. You want to acknowledge them. And I remember a few years ago, Rick, I remember taking a group out. We have a service day at our work, one day a year. We try to do multiple service days, but we have one fixed day where it's a service day. And so I led a group out there on the river, and we were just cleaning up trash. And it was just one of the most amazing days. Of course, it was a beautiful day, but just to be able to walk alongside other folks and just talk, and all at the same level. It didn't matter our positions. We were all there doing one thing, and we had a common cause, and we had so much fun. Got lots of great pictures out there by the river. It was just so much fun. And I know you've got some examples of service too, and I'd love for you to share your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I really credit the John Maxwell team and the people within the team of awakening my servant heart. It was something that was missing. I was working so hard and so focused on building my career, and I think a lot of you may feel that way. That there's a piece missing, something missing. You're chasing the dream, you're chasing the circles, whatever that may be, and there's just kind of a hole in your heart. You're missing something, and that was fulfilled for me through service. And so when I joined the John Maxwell team, I had heard about these country transformation trips, and I just made that the goal. Next one, I'm going to go. And that happened to be Costa Rica for me. And in Costa Rica, not only did we serve the country, but we had a service day. You could actually stay an extra day and do service. And we worked at these schools for Costa Rican children. And it was one of the most powerful days on record. There's bonds that were made there that continue strong, but we're like painting railings, and I'm sitting there holding a ladder for one of our mentors and coaches, Christian Simpson, and he's up there, scraping rust off of a drain, so that we can paint it. And we just had the best conversations. But the most powerful moment for me in Costa Rica, there's multiple, but one of the most is at the end of the service day, they gave us a little gift, and they didn't have a lot. We'd given, donated to this school. And so they just had these little cupcakes for us, right? It was just nice and I turned around and I saw this little boy. He was sitting with Anna Simpson, Christian's wife, and he was, crying. He was upset, and I didn't know why he was crying, and Anna didn't know. And so I just went over and I gave him the cupcake, and I was like, "Hey, you want this?" I'm working on my weight. I don't need to be eating cupcakes. And so he just sat there. And I remember he just ran his little finger through the icing, and it's just something was bothering him. So it was time to call the kids out, and they leave, and that was kind of the end of the interaction. And I turned around, and we're about to leave, and all of a sudden I hear something behind me, and I turn around, and the little boy just comes running back, and he gives me a hug, and he's saying something to me. And so I called the translator over, and he said getting that cupcake was one of the nicest things that's ever happened to him. And I went to tears, Paul. And Christian Simpson was the person that was there to kind of lift me up. And just, I remember I'm just sobbing into Christian Simpson's, shoulder. I don't even know why. You know what I mean? Like, it just getting a cupcake from a random dude, you know what I mean? Like I was trying to question the significance of it. And Christian was just like, it's powerful. Just let it go. And that was a moment where Christian and I bonded, and we talk about it all the time. Every time we see each other, we talk about, scraping off the paint stuff. And all of that experience, though, came through serving with purity of heart.
Yeah.
My other story I always share, though, is like I grew up in the restaurant industry, and when I was asked to serve for the first time at JMT, I was asked to run the food room. Basically, I was just supposed to sit at the end of a line. And I think this is where you and I actually met, Paul. I was supposed to just sit there and direct people, and I ended up getting there used to be a section where there would be tables where you could eat with PAC members, and that became kind of my area to work. And so my job was to talk to people and then go sit them down at tables, make sure all the tables were filled, and that the PAC members had a chance to speak into these new members. And I had such fun that I ended up working every shift. I was only supposed to work lunch. I ended up working breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And that was just something I continued. And then that became a consistency thing. So I remember it's probably 3-4 years into it. I slept through my alarms. I wasn't there for breakfast. Now, I wasn't supposed to be there for breakfast. It wasn't my shift, but I was like an hour late to breakfast. I had like 142 texts, Paul,
Oh,
people
no.
asking if I was okay.
Oh, man.
Because every time they walked in that food room, I was in my spot. And that, to me, that outpouring of people back to me, like, you don't even know who's looking when you
Yeah.
serve with purity of heart, and you don't even know what people expect, right, on that piece. But when all of a sudden there's one small inconsistency, the amount of people that you've impacted show up. And it was that was a huge moment for me as well. What about you, Paul?
Yeah, that's so good. I just love those stories. You know, one of the things I wrote down at the very beginning, and I apologize for the ruffling on my paper if you heard that, but you said something that really hit me when you were talking about Costa Rica. And I wrote this down. I just felt like a download. Service will save you. Service will save you. And I really believe that. I think, you know, sometimes we're in a position where maybe we feel like a victim. Maybe we feel alone. And when we're in a position where we're not serving, there's trust can't be reflected at all if we're not in a state of service. To be honest with you, when we're in a state of service, trust is reflected. But not only that, we get something back. You know, my uncle had a saying, and I've shared it on this podcast before: your outlook drives your output, and your output always comes back around as input. And he's talking about, you know, what you sow is what you reap. And when you go out and serve, it is something amazing that happens. It lifts you up. It will save you. It will save you. And I've seen people whose lives have been turned around because of service. And we have that effect as leaders. Our best way to lead is to serve. Who is the greatest among you? Those who serve. You know, Jesus said that. You know, we need to reflect, we need to remember that. What does it do for us? It is a level of trust. It is the most important item to recognize what trust is. We talked about credibility, dependability, all right? Well, when you serve, that's a reflection of those two things. When you showed up at the lunchroom every day, you showed yourself as, hey, look, there's somebody who's dependable, who's there. And then people got to know you. You became credible. What were you doing? You were serving the whole time. You can't get to credibility and dependability unless you're actually in a state of serving. So that's sort of the take there. And, you know, we had a chance to sit down with Mike, and Mike, he couldn't be here today. Why? Because he's serving his son right now. And credit to him. You know, he's being credible and dependable for his son, you know, and that's a model for all of us. And but he wanted to sit down and just share his thoughts. And he's super excited, by the way, because the next factor that we're going to be talking about next week is ownership. And so he sat down, talked a little bit more on the service element of trust, and then he kind of did a lean in on where it takes us, that you can't really get to that factor of ownership unless you get through this factor of trust and serving. So here's Mike. Again, we're missing you on the podcast recording, but I'm so glad that I was able to kind of sit down with you for a few minutes here before you went on your trip and talk about this third factor of trust. You know, we've talked about being credible, we've talked about being dependable, but when you're bringing that all together, you get this really powerful concept of being able to serve and make an impact in the community, within the culture, within the world, really, when you think about it. So what are your thoughts on this, right? So trust, third factor, serving, what comes to mind for you?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind, Paul, when I think about, so we're talking about teamwork, right? This idea of breaking average, 7 critical factors for teams, that really work and thrive. And when you ask me that question, Paul, I get a sense of there's things in life where I know I've let people down in my life. You know, serving is not a strength of mine. To be real honest, you know, I'm just being, real transparent here. It's not a strength of mine, never has been, unless I was serving my own, my own cause, my own agenda. And I think of the teams that I grew up on playing. I played baseball up through college. I played football. I was a real selfish teammate back in my younger years, right? Because I was so interested in winning, not necessarily the prize, but the win. Like I'm a sore loser, Paul. I don't know if you know that about me, but I'm a sore loser, right? I hate to lose. And so that made me a bad teammate at times. And I didn't necessarily serve my teammates.
Hmm.
I yelled at my teammates. I bullied my teammates. I felt like I thought I was a leader, Paul. Here's the interesting thing, right? I thought I was a leader, like being loud and proud and scream and yell. And you know me, Paul, after 10 years, you know my personality. I'm a kind of a dominant, assertive guy, but I'm much better at it today because I do it from a leadership and a not an assertive standpoint, but a serving way.
Yeah.
Let's serve the mission. What's the mission? And
Yeah.
try to wrap people around. So to me, when I think your question was what comes to mind, what really comes to mind is how I let people down early in my life, the teams that I was on. But then the transition I made, Paul, because when I was 22 years old, I joined the military, and it was the greatest thing I ever did because I was around, in the military, you're taught teamwork in a way that really you're not taught like playing sports. It's different. When in the military, you're taught to serve with people for a greater good. And so it was when I was in the military where I began to make that transition in leadership of, okay, leadership is service.
Yeah.
It's service to other people. It's serving my teammates. It's serving those that I lead. It's serving my country. It's serving a bigger mission. And so I had to make that transition. I think all of us have to do that at some point because at the end of the day, Paul, we're all selfish as humans. Like we all have our selfish agendas. But when we think about building trust, we have to make that transition from self-serving to others serving, like to serving others, right? From self-serving to serving others. And that's kind of my thoughts around that, Paul.
Yeah, yeah, and I love the military tie-in, right? Because you think about it, right? We talked about being credible, being dependable. You need to go through those two first so that you can serve, right? I mean, we've got men and women who are serving our country. And for them to serve, they've got to first make sure, okay, are you credible? Are you dependable? Mm-hmm. And then when they're in that position to serve, what an impact that is. That's how you measure trust. You measure trust by the amount of serving that you do with one another, with your team, and maybe those within the community that you serve within, right? Mm-hmm. And when you shared your story of being in the military, I mean, what a transition too, right? When we get into that servant mindset, we get into that training to be to serve. What a transformation that can be for an individual and a team. I've seen teams come together who are trying to win and they couldn't win, and the coach said, "Okay, well, we just need to get out there in the community." And I'm like, "What, coach? What are you going to do? Don't we need to train? Don't we need to practice?" And what he did was he put him out in the community. He had him serve the community. I was part of that. I was an assistant coach, and I was like, these kids were coming together like they had never before. It was all of a sudden, it was a different game, and it shaped and shifted the whole mentality of the team. It's pretty powerful. So,
yeah, I think of Paul. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Any Given Sunday, but it's a fantastic movie. One of the greatest motivational speeches I've ever seen is, Al Pacino is the coach of this football team, and it has a lot of different actors in it. But there's a scene in the locker room where he's kind of trying to get the team to believe in one another, to serve one another, and the quote that the only quote I remember out of that movie, he says, either we heal together as a team or we die as individuals. Mm-hmm. And what he was trying to do is get them to serve each other, right? Mm-hmm. Either we heal as a team or we die as individuals. And I think that's the essence of servant, when it comes to teamwork, of being a servant, like serving our team, is we have to set aside our own agenda and learn to work together, serve our fellow man, woman, lock arms with them, mm-hmm. And serve. And Paul, I think that's the essence of serving and teamwork. And then it requires ownership of our beliefs, our behavior, our attitude, our vision. I mean, there's a lot of different things that we can talk about. I know we're going to talk about ownership in the next chapter of this book, which is my favorite topic. I actually, had a part of writing that chapter, but I think ownership is key to build credibility, to build dependability, and to be a servant. You have to own your own attitude, beliefs, behaviors to make that happen.
Yeah, what a great setup too, and I'm looking forward to that podcast recording, and we'll have you back for that. But Mike is spot on, guys. We're talking about trust. We're talking about being credible, dependable, how we can measure it with having that service mentality, serving people, serving others, serving our team. And it really opens the door, because you can't get to ownership unless you have buy-in in those values, which we talked about in the very beginning. And again, I don't want to dive into ownership too much, but I know you're passionate about that. So, definitely hype that up, Mike, while I got you here in a minute. Why is it so important for our listeners and our viewers to make sure that they're a part of those podcasts that we do?
Yeah, I think ownership is everything, Paul. It really is. I mean, when I think about the book that you've written, Breaking Average, I was, number one, I was honored to be asked, but then when you asked me to own the chapter of ownership, I was excited, because I don't think anything happens without individual ownership. Like, nothing happens, nothing moves forward. I mean, it's easy for a leader, a coach, or anybody. You can say the president of the United States, they can speak big words, right? They can give a great speech, but until someone takes ownership to move it forward, nothing ever happens, right? It's just talk. And so when you think about where we're going in breaking average, somebody's got to own it. I was just on in a conversation today with a CEO client of mine, and she just took over this hospital, brand new in the role in the organization, and the number one challenge, without me talking to her about this book, her number one challenge, she said, is ownership of the leaders that are in place. Like, they don't own their responsibility of leadership. They want the paycheck, they want the title, but they're not owning the responsibility of leadership. And I think, Paul, for anything to happen, anything good to happen, for anything breaking average to happen, you got to take ownership of your own mindset, your own thoughts, your own beliefs, your own behaviors, your own position of leadership, and your own position on the team, like to serve other people, to be dependable, to be credible. And through that, you build trust with other people, but it begins with individual ownership.
Wow, great to see our brother in arms there, Mike. He still finds a way to pick on me, even though he's not present with me. So no, but yeah. So, but Mike is a great example. I remember, I remember seeing you. I remember seeing Mike. I remember seeing like Mark McAuliffe's. Some of these people that were just like showing up and serving, and it was something for me that I was like, I want to be like that. Not, I want to be in their circle. Not that I want to serve the way you guys serve. You guys were kind of my mentors for that. So how do we cultivate and really help other people understand what the power is of serving, Paul?
Yeah, I love it. It's so easy to talk about vision, right? In fact, that's the very first factor. And we think, okay, leadership starts with vision, without vision, the people perish. Well, without service, the people perish too. So I think vision, it's not enough. Faith, I'm a faith guy, but faith in itself is not enough, not without action. How do you take that action? It comes through service, Jay Johnson, who co-authored this book, he had a quote in there that I love. He says, trust comes through vulnerability. You've got to be vulnerable. You've got to hold the ladder for Christian Simpson. You've got to put yourself in a position. You got to travel to where you need to go. And it's tough. It's not easy. Sometimes we just want to sit back and watch, whatever. But sometimes the best thing for us to do is just to get out. So a couple of thoughts from Jay. He says, you can't have trust without vulnerability. When we trust in others, we expose ourselves to potential risk, but it's a risk we have to take to accomplish the mission. We're on a mission. Leaders who choose to be vulnerable with others create trust that lasts a lifetime. And you and I have talked about it, builds relationships. Something we never forget. So here's some thoughts though. Affirm those contributors on your team. Just recognize what they're doing, applaud them, affirm them, acknowledge them in terms of what they're doing, the service that they're committing to. There's nothing greater. Rick, have you ever done this when you're in the airport and you see somebody who's wearing who's serving and they're wearing their uniform, and you just go up to them and say thank you for your service? Have you ever done that?
Not only that, I think one of my favorite moves, and I don't know what came over me. It was a short flight it landed at Birmingham, right? So by the
Yeah.
time you get up, you're coming down. But I often get upgraded to first class because of the amount I travel. And I gave and one of those. Instead of just saying thank you for serving, I gave him my seat, and I sat back and coach. Just do that. But he wrote me a letter that brought me to tears. Like, it was just, he asked for my contact info. I gave it to him. And again, I don't know what it was that compelled me, but yeah, that felt great.
Yeah, that's a great story. I love that. And if I ever get a chance, United, I'm flying. If you give me first class, I'll do the same thing that Rick just did. So put me in first class, and maybe I'll make that happen. So, but at any rate, here's the thing. I'll see somebody in the airport. And I'll just feel compelled, Rick. I'll go up to them and I say, thank you, sir, for your service, or thank you, ma'am, for your service. And I don't know how many times I've heard this. They turn around, they smile, they say, thank you. And here's the common thing that they say, and this is not a Chick-fil-A phrase. This is their phrase, and I think they really mean it. And not to say that what Chick-fil-A doesn't mean what they say either. So that's a different discussion and dialogue altogether. But what they say is, it's my honor. It's my honor. And I love that, because I walk away, I'm like, wow, they love serving. What I just shared for them is something that they're thankful for, which is good. But that element of service, it's their honor to do that. And why? Because it elevates them. There's something that happens inside of us when we serve, where we just feel like, wow, I'm making an impact. We want to add value. What's the best way to add value? It's to serve. So yeah, those are some powerful thoughts, man. And I would just encourage leaders, affirm them, thank them for their service, and see what kind of impact it's going to make on them.
Yeah, I'm gonna throw out everything I had prepared for this based on this conversation, which is what happens often. That's why we love this podcast. We build off of each other. But coming back to your comment, service saves us. And I tell this story a lot of times on stage for the opening of John Maxwell team, but I'm going to tell it here really quickly. I was in a really, really, really dark place before I found the John Maxwell team. I had a successful business, but I was just coming off one of my most significant failures, questioning everything that I was supposed to do. And I got the phone call at that point to come join the John Maxwell team. And I'll be 100% honest on this. I was 100% selfish in accepting that invitation. I said, wow, John's a powerful person. I'm going to get some referential authority. I see how I can leverage this in my business. And so, yeah. So when I came into training, even, I was like, I don't know what this is going to do for me. Like, I'm already speaking. What's speaker training going to do for me? Right. I'm already leading. What is this going to do for me? Mm-hmm. So I came in completely selfish. Even that first experience of IMC, I don't think was a 100% great experience for me, because I was being so selfish throughout the whole thing. I got a chance to come back and I re-audited, and that's the first time I was asked to serve and started to serve. And that's what awakened my servant heart. I said it before, but that's what awakened my servant heart. And the moment that I started to give to the team fully, not to John, not to my career, not to the credibility I thought I was getting by having, his name behind mine. When I really started to serve is when the doors and things just started to open up for me. Mm-hmm. And this passion for service really ignited. And I would say that through the service of the John Maxwell team, it saved me. I mean, there's no other way to say it, is that it saved me from the darkness that I was in. And I live a completely different life now than I was or would have, had I not joined.
Oh man, that's a powerful story, man. That is, you know, I can say the same thing, you know, that there have been my struggle points in life. What saved me was serving, you know, and doors open when we serve. Doors open when we serve. And it just makes us more aware of opportunities. We don't see, when you serve, you don't see the challenges, you see the opportunities. And it's really powerful. And how do we get to trust? We get through trust by serving, right? And we show ourselves as being trustworthy when we serve, which is pretty powerful. Guys, this has been fantastic. You know, Rick, you and I, we should have a cup of coffee and just keep this thing going beyond the podcast, because I think we're both excited about this. And I want to thank our guest, David Horsager, who joined us for part one. You know, last week on dependability, and then this week we talked about service. He kind of gives us some real great takeaways, and I hope you really took and captured notes on those things. We had a lot of great content today. So we missed Diane. You know, she was under the weather again today, but missed her. And Mike, Mike, thanks for serving your son, and thanks for serving our country. We can't wait to have you back. And just great. So really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and Paul, why don't we get to well, first of all, again, we want to thank David Horsager, and you can go to and now, of course, that link is, I've got it. Hang on. I've got the link. You guys just stay with me. It's trustedleaderbook.com/breaking average. Hopefully, based on last week's podcast, we already blew that up, but let's do it again. Let's hit it a second time because now we have to buy that second book so that we can serve others and help bring trust to them. But let's do our tip and challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is fun. I always love the tip and challenge bit, you know, and there's certainly more that we could unpack and share, but we're like, okay, what's one tangible thing I can do? What's one thing that I can do to make a difference? You know, maybe a tiny habit. I'm reading a book right now called Tiny Habits, which is fantastic. What's a tiny habit that I can do that I can build on that'll change the game, right? Belief drives behavior. What's my belief? And then what's my behavior going to be because of this? And today, you know, I think some new seeds were planted. So here's my tip. Build trust. The best way to build trust is through service. We've already talked about trust requires you to give more than you take. Think about it. If trust requires you to give more than you can take, what's the best way to do that? Well, it's to serve. You know, I love how Jay shares, and as a contributing author of that chapter, he says, givers gain trust because they consistently demonstrate their willingness to put the needs of others before their own. If you do that, Rick, you've done this. I've seen you model this. When you do that, there's just something satisfying, something really, truly satisfying that's happening right in here when we do that. And we all have the capacity to do that. We build trust through deposits of service. We gain trust through deposits of service. We model trust through deposits of service. Just keep depositing a little bit of service. It can be a smile. It can be just a hello, a warm welcome, a hold the door. There's lots of different ways to do it. Just start small, but do it. Do it now. It makes a difference. It will elevate your life and it'll elevate other people's lives. I really believe it.
Yeah, and I love that tip and challenge. I think the tip I have is also create opportunities so that others can serve. Right. So once you've already understood that service opens doors, I give you a couple examples on that. One, I volunteer a lot with junior achievement. It was something that I wanted to do just so that I could teach at my son's school. And then I kind of fell in love with the piece. And I had been doing that prior to coming to the John Maxwell team. Well, John Maxwell team has this thing called the Global Youth Initiative. And all these people are trying to figure out how to get into schools. And I had a couple of relationships with principals, and I was asking them, you know, how do people break into schools, right? And really start to impact the youth. And he says, Rick, I get, 45, 50 calls a day from people saying, oh, I've got this program I want to take kids through. I've got this youth program and that kind of stuff. And I'm sitting here, I started to think right then though, but how do I have this relationship with you? How do I have this trust with you? And it was through volunteering at Junior Achievement. And so that was one of the tips I gave a lot of the John Maxwell team members. I was like, first of all, Junior Achievement is already in all the schools. So if you can go build a relationship, and how do you build that relationship? through service. But
Yep.
if you go serve the schools, then they begin to trust you. Then they'll begin to trust the programs that you want to bring into the schools. And that advances you well down the line of the 40 or 50, you being another one of those 40 or 50 calls. The other thing is to use your talents to serve. And so me being a project manager, I wanted to give back to my community, but I didn't know how. Like I didn't really have the monetary resources at that time to do that. But I said, man, as a project manager, I'm an efficiency expert. And so I went to the United Way and was like, I want to volunteer my time, my talents to help organize something. And that led to this business idea of where I could get project managers involved. And originally it was going to be a funded 501c3. And so I did all the paperwork. I opened it up. I called it the Ramsey Foundation to name it after my daughter. And when I went to go fill out my first grant, it didn't feel right to me. I was like, this is money. Like I'm using it to fund. It doesn't feel good. I'm not gonna be a funded 501c3. So I started trying to figure out what I'm going to do next. And what I came down to was finding a way to serve project managers who had just lost their jobs and needed to find, employment, or just so that they don't have a gap in their resume, and to serve the community. So I would match a project manager with a charity. That project manager would need to give 5 to 10 hours a week. That's all. And then they could use the Ramsey Foundation on their resume. Well, the unintended benefit of that is generally who is on the boards of these charities. It's executives of generally the largest employers in the cities, your CEOs, CIOs, CFOs. And here's this project manager serving the charity that they're donating their time to. And one of the first people I placed ended up going to work for one of the executives from the board because he was impressed with how she served that charity. And that opened up the idea. I was like, okay. So not only are you serving the charity, but you're, again, advancing the ability to build trust and a relationship with somebody you wouldn't get to through the normal interviewing process. So all of that to say, if you find ways to create the ability for other people to serve something they're passionate in, that begins to open doors for them. And then they're going to remember that, and they're going to create the ability. It's almost like doing the pay it forward in the fast food line, but create the opportunities for people to serve others, let them feel that impact, and then that becomes an exponential growth path.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And here's the thing. How do you find those opportunities to serve? They're all around us. They're everywhere, and you shared some good examples, but it might be, within your team, you might see a need. There's a need for somebody. As I mentioned earlier, we do a day of service. One of the ways that we find out how do we serve is we ask our team, hey, what's a need out there that we should address, that we can address? It doesn't mean it's a financial commitment. Sometimes it is. It means just going out there and doing something for somebody. We're in the midst of COVID and everything else and the pandemic that's happened and the struggles and challenges that we all face. What a difference it makes when we can go serve somebody. We have a meal train sometimes for folks where if somebody is out because of COVID, we find ways to be able to distribute food to that person. There are so many different ways to do this, guys. And when you serve, boy, it makes a difference. You can't break average unless you really are in the state of serving. Truthfully, you can't break average unless you're in the state of serving. So Rick, I really appreciate what you share, and I love how you modeled this for me. You've been an impact in my life, and I've really enjoyed this conversation. And again, our sponsor, in-kind sponsor, David Horsager, the Trust Edge expert, has got that brand new book. He's got a resource just for you. Just go to the trustedleaderbook.com/breaking average, or go to our website, breakingaverage.com. Definitely grab it, please. He's a friend to us here in this community, and he wants to add value to you, and he's trying to serve. And so appreciate him doing that. So Rick, this has been fantastic.
Yeah, it's been a great conversation today, Paul. It's got me fired up, man. This topic has me fired up, and appreciate you creating the opportunities for me to help serve on this podcast. So we appreciate that. And once again, I'm inspired by our interactions, how we build off of each other, and our mission of leadership and breaking average. So join us again next time. You never know what nuggets we're going to drop. So please join along. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching on the Empowered Living Show. Thank you for watching on YouTube and all the different ways that you can access the show. And we'll see you again next time.
Thank you for listening to the Breaking Average podcast. If you loved what you heard, please take a moment to subscribe. All opinions and comments expressed in this podcast are those of the participants and do not reflect the opinions or views of any of the advertisers, producers, or platforms. This show was produced by R2 Multimedia. A special thank you to Milestone Melodies for our theme music. As you continue your day, what is one action that you can apply from this podcast to your life? Tune in for our next episode as we continue to challenge everyone to break average.